Hey viewers, and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at using our associated carbon pile battery tester to test the alternator on this 1990 Olds 98 Regency. Let's go ahead and get started. First things first, we will unwrap the cables. Now, this being a side post terminal battery kind of complicates some things. So what we'll do is we're going to take these adapters and we slide them up in the middle of the clamp. I'm going to push down a little bit. Hang on, kind of need two hands for that one. Okay, so kind of like the aliens, you know, like Sigourney Weaver, you can see where that is going to poke through, and then we have a little lump on these side posts. There's like a notch out where you can slide that down. It's not probably the most bestest way of doing it, but it works. So, all right, there we go. We'll do the exact same thing right up there. Make sure we got a good, solid, secure connection and all that good stuff. Perfect. The tester is attached to the battery. Next, what we'll do for the most accurate test is I'm just going to remove this cover from the engine temporarily. But we need to locate the output of the alternator, and that is actually right here. So this wire right here, hopefully you can kind of see it underneath the spark plug wires. So in case that wasn't super clear, just tracing the wire going from the positive battery all the way over to the back of the alternator. So what we do, we'll go ahead and grab the amp probe. We'll slide the switch all the way over to 1,000 ohms, or excuse me, 1,000 amps, and we will clamp that around. Just make sure it doesn't get caught in the dry belt, and we'll push the blue auto zero button, just like we did before in the battery testing. Our next step is going to be, now we've zeroed the probe, and the probe is completely analog, so we'll go ahead and rotate the amps zero adjust to where it says 0. Now 12.4 is pretty low for a car battery. Definitely needs a charge, so no point in testing this battery at this point. It's going to fail. Again, small town and a very cold temperature. I think it was about 7 degrees out this morning. So definitely between the temperature and the short trips, we need to put this battery on a charge. But let's actually make sure that the alternator is indeed doing its job, because that may be why we have a dead battery. So at this point, we have the tester all hooked up. Everything is zeroed. The tester is connected directly to the battery. We have found the output wire from the alternator. It's the big, thick red, usually red of some sort, going to the positive battery terminal. We are ready to test. So at this point, what we're going to do, in our head, we know that a fully charged car battery is 12.6 volts. Okay, so we're going to use the tester. Obviously, when we start the engine, we're going to have like 14 volts on our battery. We're going to use the tester to bring the battery voltage down to 12.6 with the engine running at about 2,000 RPM. That's optimal charge RPM, if you will, for the alternator. So we got the engine running at 2 grand. We're going to use this tester to bring the battery voltage from 14 something down to 12.6. And the current probe is not measuring the current coming out of the battery. We don't care about that. A lot of people get overly obsessed. We care about the current flowing from the alternator. So at 12.6 volts on the battery, the engine running at 2,000 RPM, the alternator is going to charge as absolute powerful as it possibly can, and that is the reading that we're going to see on the screen. It should be around 100 or so amps. I think this is a 105 amp alternator when I purchased it. So we should see something pretty close to the label rating of the unit. So let's go ahead and start the engine. We should immediately see the alternator trying to charge the battery because the starter motor consumed some current from the battery. Let's make it happen. This is the current that the battery is using to recharge itself and that the car is using to run all of the electronics. So our voltage right now looks really good. 14.4, 14.5, somewhere in there. The voltage from the alternator at idle is really good. If we increase the engine RPM slightly, we shouldn't see much change in those numbers. And we don't. So now we can go ahead and begin the test on the alternator. What we're going to do, again, we're going to raise the engine RPM to about 2,000 RPM, about here, and then we're going to turn this knob down to 12.6. We're not going to test for more than about 5 seconds. (102). So this alternator puts out 102 amps. If we didn't rev the engine, you'd actually see the alternator be shortchanged a little bit. So I'm only getting about 90 amps. So pretty close to full output, but not quite. So 102 amps out of 105. So 102 correct out of 105. At 14.4, I'm gonna say this alternator is in really, really good health. Definitely, we don't have an issue with alternator output on this vehicle. To conclude the test, we'll turn our amp probe off, remove it from the car. We should summarize our test results, probably on the lab sheet that I gave you. We'll disconnect negative and positive. We'll wrap up the leads from the tester, make sure any tools, including our engine cover, are placed back into the correct spots. And we'll close the hood. Ooh. And we'll give the customer the report. Well, there you got it, folks. That is the super basic alternator test for your typical one-wire controlled alternator. So most alternators will charge somewhere around that 14.5 mark, put out around 100 amps. What I like to do for a customer, obviously this is my own car, and I'm the guy that bought that alternator, so I'm kind of aware what its rating is. But go ahead and consult your service manual. If you got a 150 amp alternator and you're only getting 100, that's not good. If your charge range is somewhere, 14.5, 14.8, and you're getting 13.2, typically the voltage regulator's gone a little out to lunch. And most people would elect to replace the alternator when that happens, although the alternator can be taken apart and have the voltage regulator and the brushes and all of that good stuff replaced on most units. But typically the time to do that exceeds the value of the alternator and doesn't come with a warranty. So hopefully you enjoyed what you saw here. I really like this associated carbon pile tester. It's been really good to us over the few years that we've had it. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.